With that, I want to invite Pastor Bryan Lindgren up. So Brian and his wife Kayla, they're dear friends. They're three kids that are just rad. They're dear friends, and they planted Assembly, a church in downtown Tacoma that meets on Sunday nights. And so they planted 3-ish years ago, and so they've been just a huge resource for us, wind in our sails. Our first public event, we got super sick right beforehand, and Brian was like, "What do you need? How can I send people?" It's beautiful when we see the kingdom work like that. It's not churches that are in competition, but in partnership. And so, anyway, Brian is going to deliver the talk today. And so with that, can you give him a round of applause as he comes up?
All right. We're doing it. Aren't we thankful for Adam and Annie and just their leadership and their care and who they are? I mean, they make it easy. It's like, talks about encouraging. I'm like, it's the easiest people. They're so kind-hearted. You meet people in your life and you're like, okay, are they that humble behind the closed doors as they are here? Annie and Adam are. Not only that humble, like they just have a spirit of and a resiliency to see Jesus work in the neighborhoods of Tacoma. I think I love Tacoma until I'm around Annie and Adam, and I'm like, they love this city. They love the people of the city. And don't they do a great job equipping us to be able to be stewards of that in our city? And you can tell, not always, it's not 100% true, but sometimes you can just tell the fruit of people who live in that sense of Jesus' kingdom by their kids. Yeah. Cayman and Quinn are amazing. They're amazing kids. And so I'm just so thankful for them. I love this church. I mean, if I wasn't doing something else, I'd probably just be here every Sunday. I was like, this is awesome. I love, you have incredible worship. You have incredible teaching. Annie is an incredible teacher. Adam's an incredible teacher. You have really great community. And you're great. Like, you think about church as people, not just the building, right? And so I just think that's the whole thing. We could be outside, and I'd be like, I love this place. So we're going to dive in. That's probably a good idea. And let's start with this. Pull out your notes. I'm hoping you take notes. You're going to have a Bible. If you're just ready to flip your Bible right open, we're going to be in Mark chapter 7. We've been going through Mark, right? This isn't week 1, right? We've been kind of going through it. Anything that you've picked up over this journey so far that stuck out to you about Mark? How far are we into the series? Third, okay. Okay. Anything that stuck out from Mark thus far? You maybe read it at home. Was there anything that just has stuck out to you about Mark? Not everyone at once. Just let's take turns. Anything that stuck out? Nope, not until chapter 7. Everything to this point has been just a lead-in. Chapter 7 is going to be the breakthrough. This is going to be the good stuff. Do this in your notes. Write down. I'm going to give you a question. You're going to be like, why would you say it? Like, this sounds like a weird way to say it. I'm going to say it the way it's going to come up in the text. Okay, so you're like, just say it a normal human way. Well, it's going to come up. I want to know in your life, I'm not going to read these. What do you need opened up? Where do you need God to open something up? Okay, I'll throw out some examples. It could be like, man, I am just feeling this weight of God open up, like my finances feel like they are so pressed. Okay, that was example 1. It could be like, man, my health has been uncontrollable and people just don't know and I feel like I hide it. I'm hoping God opens something up. It could be that you lost your job. You're like, literally, this job market's insane. Everyone who has a job, you have no idea. And I'm asking God, like, would he open up an interview? What do you need God to open up? It can't be nothing. There's no way that somebody's in here and is like, nope, pretty good. God's kind of just got it. I mean, we have to have something. So if you're like struggling to think about your own life, open something else for somebody else's. Is grandma sick? I mean, if you get a couple down, get some bad ones out, and then we'll get to some better ones. Make some bullets. What things do you need open? I'm not reading these. People at your table, we're not going to go around. Write in Pig Latin if you're worried someone's looking over your shoulder. Just like, what do you need opened up? What if God honored what you wrote down today and it actually opened? What if he's waiting for the step of faith? Okay, you're like, now you're making it weird. You're kind of bullying us into writing our notes. So while you're doing that, as Adam said, my name is Brian. My wife and I don't even know if we wanted to start a church. We just really wanted to ask Jesus his next step in our life, and we just kept taking steps. And over the course of that, we really felt invited by Jesus to create a faith community of people who normally wouldn't go to church. I don't know if they were anti-church. I don't know what they, just like a place where people were like, I don't normally go, and I would try this. And some of that was for people who tried church again. Like they maybe hadn't been going. Some of it was like they just literally had never been to church. And they're like, I think I'd give this a shot. The reason was that was our neighbors and friends. A lot of our friends just stopped going. You guys remember when we had the global pandemic? Some of us are old enough to remember. That was wild. But I just know friends who just stopped going to church. And they weren't like one A board away from going. They weren't going to drive by and be like, oh, that's right, I don't go to church. It was like they weren't going to pick something up in the mail and be like, that's right, I used to go to church. They were like, no, I don't go anymore. And I was like, what if we created something that felt like they would go? And what I love is it feels like this room where it's just like, this is what the early church felt like. It was community, like people were together. And we just had a vision for that. The other was our literal neighbors who were like, they were probably more anti-church. And it was so fun to just be like, what if you read a biography of Jesus with us? And then that just kind of kept taking steps. And people are like, you're faithful in it. I'm like, I don't even know if we're faithful. We just might be too stupid to quit. Like, I just think that's part of starting a church. And so that's our story is just, right? I don't know. It's just at some point, this is, okay, if you're like, I call Assembly home. Some of you might be like, I don't even know this church yet, but if you call Assembly home, part of it is to encourage every leader to be like, no, we're doing this because we believe the fruit of what's coming next. And can I tell you where some of that fruit is right now? It's in there. We're handing the baton off to our kids. That's not childcare. That's maybe the church, and we're just kind of playing out here. Do you see how there's a 4-year-old in there right now who's being instilled with the Spirit of God that we might look back in 40 years and be like, oh, it happened in that place? That's the stuff. We don't get to make the fruit. Okay, I don't know what you need opened in your life, but I just want that in front of you. We're going to be in chapter 7. Pull chapter 7 open. If you don't have a Bible, good news. There's some on your table. It should be marked for you. If you've never opened a Bible, this is a cool place to do it first. There's 4 biographies of Jesus, written by different authors. Mark is one of my favorites because it's fast-paced, and I like fast-paced. It's action-oriented, so there's a lot of it's moving. And then Mark's the first one written. It's just like okay, think about this. The early church starts. First of all, if I'm Jesus, I'm not doing any of this stuff. I'm like, this is a poor play, Jesus. Like, Jesus doesn't go more than 50-mile radius away from his home. That's a bad move. He should travel more. He does some public speaking, but not in the places he should. He should be in the temples. He should get the temple thing going. Once he's got the temple moving, I'm thinking get to Rome, maybe get an amphitheater. Can we rent out the Colosseum, Jesus? You're God. Okay, first, he doesn't do enough God stuff. I'm like, yeah, I get the miracle stuff, but what? Change the color of the sky? He's God. Do fireworks. Let's get this thing moving. He has no podcast. Jesus doesn't write a book. I'm like, dude, write something down. And at no point, because if I'm doing 12 disciples, this is Brian's strategy. I'd be like, okay, guys, first, who's the author? We're going to need a bunch of them. You have to write down, every story of Jesus should start with him being like, who's writing this down? None of them do. No one's writing it down. It's as if Jesus actually looked at ordinary, everyday people and thought, you're enough to carry this movement. No, that can't be true, Jesus. Who are the professionals you train? Jesus picks the people no one picked. They were actually overlooked. He picks the tax collectors. And then he's like, hey, it'd be cool. We should put him at a table with a zealot. We all are like, sure, yeah, that's Bible stuff. That is, Jesus is like, oh, okay, you drive a Nissan Leaf, you watch a certain news channel, you sit at this table, this guy's got an Ford F-150, and he watches a different news channel, we're going to join a team together. Caveat, I own both those cars, so try and pin me down. They're not going to get along. Make a list of people who wouldn't get along. Jesus is like, yeah, let's form them as a team. No, I love people who get along. Jesus is like, that'd be a great team, and I'm going to empower them. The early church, he thought that was enough. They're spending time as a church without what we think of as the Gospels. Paul's killing people. This is not a good play. And can you imagine, you're part of a community, a small community. There's all these communities forming. And someone wrote down the stories of Jesus, and you have an early copy. And you would sit in your church, there'd be food, like there's going to be later this afternoon, and they would read it start to finish like you were watching a movie. And imagine your second generation. You weren't there, but Grandpa was there. And he was there at the feeding the 5,000. Grandpa's listening to the words, and he's like, that's what it felt like. It was crazy. They thought that was enough. And then imagine this, 2,000 years later, you had the same text in front of you. And Jesus expected that you would enter the story the same way. That's what we get to go into today. And we're going to be in a section that I love Annie and Adam picked for me because it has so much tension. Mark does this thing throughout Mark as you read it. It's called the Mark sandwich. Have you guys already talked about this? Okay, Mark does this thing. Read through Mark and notice it. He does this thing that's called the Mark sandwich, where he's building an argument through stories. So he's giving you stories. He's like, here's a couple stories. There's usually in sets of 3. And he's like, boom, this story's going to set you up. Then there's this really crazy story, and then he's going to tie it together with another story. All 3 will feel like they're not the same. And then you notice the string that's pulling them together, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's it. We're going to read one today. The middle story is bananas. We shouldn't read it. If you've read the Bible ever, and maybe you read it in a group and you hit this story, you probably were like, let's just keep moving. Jesus is going to say the most unhinged thing that he maybe says the entire scripture, and if it may be my favorite. Okay, so let's dive in. I want you to pull it open. And I want to do this first. We're actually going to dive in. Our text today is going to be, we're going to use verse 24 through 37 as kind of our core, okay? So this full first story, I'm not going to just kind of I'll give you some concepts. Well, we should do this first. Flip back a page. Let's go to chapter 5. We should lead ourselves up. What happens in chapter 5? You can read the headers. Just give me like a sense. What's happening in chapter 5 before we get here?
The madman.
The what?
It says the madman.
Okay, I love that. Do a scan through what's happening in that story. Sorry, I want you to be in 6. That was my bad. We're going to be in 7. I want you to be in 6, but babe, thank you. You were ahead. You heard my, I'm repenting. Go in 6.
Sends out the disciples on their first tour.
Yep. Okay, death of John the Baptist. Would that be significant for Jesus? Why would it be significant? Did Jesus like him? Were they close? Why were they close? They're cousins. Are they similar ages? Yeah, really similar. Was John the Baptist actually like doing ministry in a way that kind of prepared the way? Wow, gosh, how does John the Baptist die? I mean, there's a lot of funerals to have. Beheaded by the empire of the day doesn't feel good. I mean, no funeral should feel good. But the death of somebody in that, it's an assassination of the movement of God. Jesus is grieving that. You're like, is Jesus fully human? Yeah, he feels it. Keep going. What else happens in 6? Bingo. Why is that story significant? I'm not looking for church answers. There's no bad answers. I'm just kind of like, why does that story matter?
It's a miracle.
It's super cool. It's a miracle. It's not even that complicated of a miracle, right? You're like, other people were hungry.
Yeah.
What does Jesus say to the disciples? Because this is going to set us right up. You feed them. Again, dude, I'm sitting with God. He's like, you feed them. I'm like, you feed them. What am I doing? Do you see how Jesus' model was to hand off the kingdom of heaven to people to keep handing it off?
Yeah.
I'd be so angry as a disciple. One of the other biographies in John says that Philip, who's from that region, is trying to answer Jesus' questions. And Philip's the one that's like, dude, it would take like a year's salary to pay for this. How are we going to feed all these people? He's like, I know the drive-thrus here. There's not enough food. And Jesus is like, you feed them. Does Jesus invite us into the story before we're ready? I think so. The significance of the story, of that story, is this idea around food. We're going to dive right into that here in chapter 7. So we're going to look at this. Chapter 1 all the way through, we get this first kind of moment with Jesus. And I wrote down a couple notes as we check this out. So one thing I wrote down is this idea of maps. So before we talk about where Jesus is going to go in chapter 7, we have to think about this idea of maps. Every culture has maps, not paper ones, but invisible ones. So have you ever been somewhere where you needed a map because it mattered? Like, I mean, you've never been to somewhere in Tacoma. Does the map really matter? You're like, I'll figure it out. It's just going to be inconvenient if I didn't get there. But where have you been where a map mattered? Where? Yeah. That really matters, right? Why does it matter? 100%. This is probably the best example. We're not going to get a better example. Some of us will say other things, but we were trying to get here. That's a great example. If we don't know, not only is there danger, we die. Okay, so maybe you've traveled. Like I was in Chicago one time, and it was like, well, I'm trying to get somewhere, and it was like, honestly, you want to get to here, but if you end up over here, you don't want to end up over there. And I don't know my way, so the map matters, right? So the map gets us to our destination, tells us where to go and where not to go. So we have invisible maps. They had invisible maps. The maps are how we get to places. Now here's what can happen is the map that carries the Spirit of God, when we as gatekeepers, or when we become gatekeepers with the map, that's when it closes the mission. That's what the Pharisees had done. Yeah. So in this first part, they're talking about hand washing and ceremonial stuff. We glance over this and we're like, that's so dumb. Jesus, rip them apart, Jesus. Okay, so let's just back up for a second. God gives the law to the people, the Torah, right? The first 10 commandments, people are like, religion's a bunch of rules. The 10 commandments are pretty good rules, right? I mean, I like all of them. Do not murder is a pretty good rule, right? I mean, you were like, Jesus is so cool. He's running around. He's like breaking the rules. And you're like, no, Jesus is informing how we look at it, but the rules are good rules. So we're like, okay, hand washing. Well, let's jump back. Because God takes the people out of Egypt, and then he has to take Egypt out of the people. If you've got a brand new culture that has no idea about germs, is it kind of cool that God set them up and elevated them to be able to live and thrive and have equity for each other? Because you would eliminate germs? That is cool. That is a good thing. You're like, the Pharisees turned those 10 laws into all these other laws. Go read all the other laws. You'd still be like, these are pretty good things. Yeah. Should the land Sabbath? Have we seen a world where we just corrupted our land around us? You're like, does the land need a break? Yeah. These are good. But what happens is the vehicle becomes a way to keep people out. So there's a concept I love. It's called bounded set and centered set. A bounded set is this, and Kelly, I'm going to have a slide for this. A bounded set is defined by its boundary. Belonging is determined by whether you are inside the line or outside it. The line is the thing. It is what the community spends its energy maintaining, defending, and policing. The Pharisees were really good at this. Yeah. This was their washing their hands. Washing their hands was an indicator of who was in and who was out. We all have our internal maps. We want to disclude some and include others. But there's another approach, and this is called the center set. The center set is defined by its center and the vectors moving towards the center. So belonging is not determined by position relative to a boundary, but by orientation relative to a point. In a centered set, the question is not, are you inside the line, but which direction are you facing? What are you moving towards? Notice this in Jesus' life. People were like, what are you talking about? Think about this. There's always people inside and outside. The Pharisees were really good at noticing which one you were. Jesus is looking at your trajectory. Are you moving towards him? Are you moving towards the foot of the cross or away from it? There's people that Jesus, you would assume, had all the right answers, and yet they seem to be moving further away from the kingdom of God. It says the rich young ruler went away sad. He was moving away from Jesus' kingdom. But you also see Roman officers who should be outside the set, who are moving towards Jesus. You notice it was Zacchaeus. He's literally physically like trying to get towards Jesus while he should be on the outside. This framework is going to give us a lens as we look at this entire chapter. So let's keep going. We're going to pull up let's do this. Go to one other thing I want to pull up. Let's do this. The Greek word is koinos, and this means common or defiled. This is the word that Jesus is using here in these purity traditions. So Jesus is saying that the defilement comes from the inside out, not the outside in. That's what Jesus is setting up. Okay, so open your Bibles to Mark chapter 7, verse 24. Someone read that verse. Not all at once.
Then Jesus left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre.
Okay, so we're gonna stop right there. The would have gasps in the room. Like, where is he going? To us, Jesus is going to another place. To that cultural space, they would have been like, well, Jesus, we don't go there. Okay, so why is that significant? Here's the ancient historian Josephus, Kelly, I have a slide that says this, described it as the most bitter enemy of the Jewish people. Okay, it was home of Jezebel, daughter of Ephphatha, king of the Sidonians, the woman who brought Baal worship into the heart of Israel and hunted the prophets of Yahweh nearly to extinction. This place had significance. If you were a young Jewish girl or boy, or you were one of the disciples, you didn't go there. It was a bad stain on the memory of who you were, and it showed the defilement of people coming in and basically hijacking or creating terrorism around who you see Yahweh as. This is a God of justice and mercy, and someone comes in and defiles all of that. I mean, this should create some tension in us. Like, think about the things that you love that feel pure and holy and good, and someone defiles it. We're so quick to jump to like, yeah, that person's like, why would you think less of them? Well, we do this all the time. It felt so gross to them because it was such a tarnish to who God is. And Jesus goes there? This is going to set us up. Verse 25. Let's read this together. So it says this. Okay, so Jesus didn't want anyone to know which house he was staying in, but he couldn't keep it a secret. Right away, a woman had heard about him, came and fell at his feet. Her little girl was possessed by an evil spirit, and she begged him to cast out the demon from her. Since she was a Gentile born in Syrian Phoenicia, Jesus told her, first, I should feed the children, my own family, the Jews. It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. She replied, that's true, Lord, but even the dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scraps from the children's plate. Good answer, Jesus says. Now go home, for the demon has left your daughter. And when she arrived home, she found her little girl lying quietly in bed, and the demon was gone. End of scene. Yeah, I read this one every night to my kids before they go to bed. You're like, what are we going to talk about at Easter? Probably this, because it's an odd story, okay? So do this. First, glance through it. What words or phrases stick out to you, good or bad? Feel something. What words stick out? Dog. Yeah, that one's hard to miss. This one, sometimes you're like, golly, Jesus, you just feel so grumpy. Just do a better, do you not have one PR person giving you, a little bit of insight? What other words or phrases?
Possessed.
Mm-hmm. Faith, yes. That's a cool moment there. Good answer. Whoa. Okay, so if that's not in there, and it's like, all right, I'm like, interesting story. That right there is the hinge point. Something is happening here. Anything else that sticks out? Yeah. So Matthew's gospel also tells this story. In Matthew's gospel, he says she's a Canaanite woman. Canaanite and Jews, they get along? No, they don't, right? It's kind of a new not getting along. It's fresh. No, they've been doing this for a while. It's hard to imagine because we can't imagine a world where there'd be tension between different places in the Middle East. No, really easy to imagine, okay? So why is there tension between the Canaanites and the Jews? Great, I wrote some down. So here's a couple of them. One, the land of the Canaanites were taken from them. Whoa. Yeah, okay, I see that. That could create some bitterness. Okay, so for the Canaanites, this is an existential annihilation framed as someone else's theology. Oh, dang it, that doesn't feel great. Okay, the conquest was never finished. So think about this. Unfinished wars don't produce peace. They produce resentment that ferments across generations, a low-grade hostility that never quite becomes open conflict and never quite becomes reconciliation. It's Cold War-esque. Okay, so their gods were competitors. You had Baal, you had Molech. It goes back to this story of Jezebel, which is a lot of tension for both groups of people. Also, interesting that there's a story right here that we're looking at of a Canaanite woman with a daughter in the place that has a notorious kind of evil woman as its character. Jesus is doing some redemption here that's a lot bigger than the imagination of the people sitting there. Okay, so Canaanites were notorious for child sacrifice. An evil, wicked practice that God, Yahweh, had said, like, this is evil. They're participating in it. God says, don't marry foreign people. Like, it will create tension for you. And the Jewish mind just keeps saying, dang it, we can't stay away from them. They can't stay away from us, and also we hate them. It's a complicated relationship. Another reason was there's economic exploitation. Canaanites were very well off, well educated. They had a lot of exports. The Jewish people were mostly known for agricultural reasons. There was a sort of hierarchy where Canaanites did feel like they were better. They were well-read, well-educated. They're not stupid. The last I just put down is the word became a slur. So to call someone a Canaanite was a slur. Okay, so let's dive into this really quick because we've got two stories here and we're going to wrap up and worship together. She's asking for what? Healing. Okay, so this doesn't feel like a heavy lifting for Jesus, right? How does he heal the daughter? It just happens, right? Like, he doesn't go anywhere. So it's not an inconvenience, right? This isn't like Jesus like, oh, I'm going here, I can't come. It's literally like he just says something. This feels like jerk Jesus, right? It's like, what are you trying to prove? A point? Like, she's got a demon in her. It's not a cough. And you're just like holding it out off of like what, principle? Yeah. Let's sit on the word for a second. Let's sit on the word. She says scrap. So first, Jesus, what does Jesus call her? A dog. Okay, we're going to have a hard time with this with our cultural imagination, but I'm going to get us close. It feels super offensive. Yeah. It feels really offensive. It feels like beyond, and we're like, golly, Jesus. So there may have been a tinge of tension, but the word Jesus intentionally uses here is different than the slur used. They called the Canaanite people dogs. The word Jesus uses here is like that word, but it means more like a friendly pet. So Jesus is playing with the concept, but it's not the same concept, okay? So here's where maybe our mind could get of like the offense level. If you vote conservative, I might pick an animal to call you. What would I call you? Elephant. Some faces made a funny face, and I was going for an animal. Okay, so if you tend to vote more progressive or liberal, you might be a donkey. Okay, so do you see how like we use those, and like it's not necessarily offensive, but it is like it could be. The phrase dog could be offensive. Jesus is playing with it. There's also something happening here where she is entering what they would have seen as a rabbi argument with a disciple. He is giving her a rabbinic invitation. Rabbis would do this thing where they'd give you a mysterious word and they would see if you took it, and then they'd have a conversation that looked like a debate to us. Jesus is doing this. He's looking at trajectory. He invites her into something. To us, it feels like he's just threatening her, but he says he gives her a little bit, and she goes for it. Jesus is modeling discipleship here for the disciples. Yeah. She leans in. She almost leans in the same way Moses does with God when they're in the same land of Canaan, and God says, I'm going to destroy all of the Israelites, and Moses says, no, don't. That's not your character. That's not who you are. You are this type of God. You are a God that's slow to anger, full of compassion. She comes back and she says, oh, I think I know a little bit about your character and your God. And we read the word scraps as offensive. Really, it's like leftovers, overflow leftovers. Even the overflow leftovers. This kingdom has overflow. Where in the disciples' mind would they have just thought about leftovers? It just happened, didn't it? And was it just around food? Do you see how Jesus is play acting something that the disciples would watch and be like, what is happening right here with this Canaanite woman? She should not be invited on the inside. And she's saying, oh, I know about leftovers. This kingdom, this new creation, it spills out everywhere. That's your character. And Jesus says, like, can you see amazement on Jesus' face?
Yeah. Wow.
There's this sense of Jesus saying, bingo, let's do it. Jesus invited her to be a participant in a scene called This Is What New Creation Looks Like. Okay, we're going to worship here in a second, but should we wrap up with one more story? Let's keep going. Let's jump to the next section. Next section says this. Jesus keeps moving. And it says, Jesus left Tyre and went to Sidon before going back to the Sea of Galilee and the region of the 10 towns. This is not a convenient way to travel. He's going way outside his course. He's getting worse. The disciples are like, dude, where did you take us? This feels terrible. You took us to Vegas. And he's like, great. Where's another, like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Okay. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him. The people begged Jesus to lay his hands on the man to heal him. Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. By the way, from this area, in chapter 5, somebody was healed that's from here. Oh, that's right. It's the madman. It's the guy who's possessed. Jesus says, go back and tell everybody. Do you see how this is the good news spreading? Jesus then goes visits them. They know the type of character of who Jesus is. They're ready to have people healed. Jesus led him away from the crowd so he could be alone. He put his fingers into the man's ears, then spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he signaled and said, Ephphatha. I think I got close, okay? So just, you can judge me later. Which means be opened. Instantly, the man could hear perfectly, and his tongue was freed, and he could speak plainly. Golly, glance at this for a second, guys. This is how Jesus works in all of our life. You see, first, Jesus takes him away from the crowd. When you need to be healed, Jesus will pull you away from the overwhelmingness of all people that feel like they're just pointing at you, noticing you, and he will heal you in the silence of just him and you. What an honoring thing to do to a person. Then you're like, Jesus gets real weird. He's like spitting and like, did you see how he healed the little girl? If I'm the guy getting spit on my ears, I'm like, dude, I think you just said something and you did it. But now here we are. Jesus is personal. Mark invites us into the story by using the literal Aramaic that Jesus would have said out loud because Mark wants us to hear the words of Jesus as he would have said them, saying, be opened. What in your life needs to be opened up by Jesus? Is it your cultural narrative of what you hold tight of who's in and who's out? Is it your idea of how you're out and other people are in and you can never be invited into the story of God? Is it who gets access to the good news of God and where it's spreading? Jesus says to that woman, like, I was going to first start with the Jews and then I was going to get to the Gentiles. It wouldn't have been offensive to her because he's basically looking at the people who should have been doing it all along. He's saying, do you see them? Yeah. We're going to fix them up so they can do what they've been supposed to do all along, which is be a blessing to all nations. Jesus told the crowd, he says, not to tell anyone. So Jesus, but the more he told them not to, the more they spread the news. They were completely amazed and said again and again, everything he does is wonderful. It's a poor translation. It's such a bad translation. There's good translations. I don't know. I couldn't find a better one. That word wonderful is the closest we would get to the word that God uses in Genesis 1 after he creates, and he says, it was good. It's an image, it's a flashback that what Jesus is doing here is the creation story happening all again. People are looking at what? Ears open, tongues free, people set free of demons, all the things that have been talked about of this is what the new king would do in his kingdom. Guys, this isn't just about Lent getting to the cross, which is what it is. It's Lent reminding us that we're supposed to go to the Tyres of our Tacoma. We're supposed to go to the people who've lost their ability, their voice, the voiceless. We are healers to those in our city who feel like they are not invited to participate in the story of God. We're going to sing together. Adam and the team are going to come back up, and I'm going to give you a couple things you can write down. The greatest thing you can do is just kind of get curious about this story and go read it at home. My job is not to translate the voice of God for you. My job is to help you fall in love with the story of Jesus and go home and spend time with him. And my job isn't to be the person that is the voice of Jesus in your life. Jesus will be the voice of Jesus in your life. You read the text and you start to ask Jesus, what do you want to say to me about this? 3 things I wrote down. These are 3 openings that happen in this text simultaneously, and all 3 are invitations to us. The first is the opening of the ears. The deaf man receives his hearing back, but there's a deeper deafness running through this entire chapter. The deafness of the disciples who have eyes but cannot see, ears but cannot hear. To be opened in the ears is to become someone who listens for God in the territory where the map says they shouldn't be. It is to stop being a person of the eyes, constantly evaluating and categorizing by what is visible, and become a person of the ears, listening for the voice of the good shepherd in unexpected places. The next is the opening of the mouth. The man's tongue is freed. He speaks plainly. Immediately, despite Jesus' instructions to stay quiet, the man can't stop proclaiming. There is a free tongue that belongs to everyone who has been healed. The impulse to tell the story, to describe what Jesus did, to carry the testimony back to your community that you thought you were beyond reach. The demonic did it. The Decapolis crowd did it. The question is, will we? The third is the opening of the imagination. This is maybe the hardest one, because our maps are not just beliefs, they are identities. They tell us who we are by telling us who we are not. To have your imagination open is to begin to see people you categorize as outside the story as people Jesus has been walking towards all along. It is to feel the boundaries of belonging expand in ways that are genuinely disorienting, not because the faith becomes vague, but because the table turns out to be far larger than you were told. Second, I'm gonna have you close your eyes. But do you see how Mark's telling the story using food, the blessing of God, and the spillover? Is Jesus teaching his disciples something? He's probably done with it by chapter 8. Flip to chapter 8 for a second. What happens next? Oh, that's right. He's feeding 4,000. Jesus is just reiterating this point of how God's going to have spillover. And is there more left over, or not everyone got fed? No, there was more left over. Oh, that's done right, because Jesus is done talking about food. No, he's going to talk about the yeast of the Pharisees. Jesus is drilling in this idea that we, because we are part of the kingdom of God, have spillover that's going to speak to the lives of people. With every eye closed and every head bowed. The law, the Torah, had become this boundary, this gate. And Jesus says, you're not going to be gatekeepers. You're going to be gate openers. And the Torah, the law of God, the structure, it wasn't a bad structure. It was just that Jesus comes and says in the Sermon on the Mount, if you want to know how to follow Torah, follow me. Watch how I live. You've heard it said, but I say. Jesus is the physical embodiment of God's law, which is good news for me because it's way simpler. And when I was not following Jesus and I was in my own just mess and disgust of my life, and I had no sense of like up and down, and I had lost my identity, I didn't become something I wasn't by following Jesus. I became the realest version of myself. If you're here and you feel that, like I'm not sure I'm in the story, take a moment right now and just to sense the Spirit of God pulling you away from the crowd. Jesus' Spirit inviting you in to heal you, to heal someone around you. You can advocate for your needs. God is a God who you get to say, like, I know I'm not in control, but God, you're like this. You're this type of person. I know your character. You're a God of mercy. So show up. Open this place that I just feel like is so stuck in my life. Every eye closed and every head bowed. This is your first time following Jesus. Saying yes to him. Being invited onto that mission. right now, under your breath, you can just say, yes, God, I'm following you. I want to turn from all the things that I hold on to that I think are the way, that are not the way. I release it. I give it all to you. I repent of my brokenness. I experience God's love. If you're here and maybe the bounded set has snuck into your heart a little bit, in a moment we're going to take communion, and that's the ultimate moment where Jesus breaks the bread, saying it's his body, inviting us into the story. The disciples didn't get it. They thought they were about to go destroy Rome and start a super army. And Jesus says, this kingdom doesn't come like that. And he repeats it again to us today. I don't know where in your life you need to experience the Spirit of God and you need to experience that opening. Maybe it's in your health, in your finances, with your relationships, in your mental health, in your fatigue, in your grumpiness, in your bitterness, in your unforgivingness. Right now, under your breath, just like, God, help open this up. Jesus, we just thank you for who you are in the story. As we worship you, would we experience the power of the story as it becomes flesh and blood and moves into the neighborhood of our lives. May we be these people who spread the story of what has been done in our hearts to others. And can we trust you, God? Can we see you as good on every page of Scripture and know that you're writing a better story than we could ever write? It's a redemptive story. It's a full story. It's a kingdom story. And we want to enter into it. In your name, amen. Would everyone stand with me as we sing together?